Microsoft received awful news about the Xbox. Nintendo's profits jumped by 428%. And Donald Trump is planning on banning WeChat in addition to TikTok. My name is Sina Makari, and you're listening to the weekly business news in 15 minutes. The point of this podcast is to give you the week's top headlines in 15 minutes or less. But before we begin, consult a licensed financial advisor before making any trades or investments. So you're probably wondering what happened with Xbox. So as a lot of you probably know, the Xbox Series X is coming out soon. And one of the applications that differentiates the Series X from the PS5 is the xCloud. Now the xCloud is a service that you can get exclusively on the Xbox Series X, which is about $11 per month. And what you can do with it is you can play your Xbox games on your mobile devices. So all what you have to do is download the application onto your mobile device, and you'll have access to all the games you play on your Xbox Series X. Now, the App Store is actually not allowing the xCloud app, and the reason why this is such a big deal is because, well, it's one of the only ways that the Series X is really different from the PS5. It's one of the only things that it really has over the PS5. And that's not to be disrespectful towards Microsoft or to the Xbox. We read a Forbes article earlier that claimed that the PS5 was going to sell twice as many units as the Xbox Series X around the world. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this. For one thing, you can't buy the Xbox in Japan. In addition, the Xbox has a very weak presence in Europe, so a lot of their sales are coming from North America. It's worth noting that the Xbox has to make up for this. They have to be able to make up for the revenue lost from potential consumers purchasing the PS5 instead of their product, and so they went with the xCloud. Now what's going on now is that Apple is not allowing the xCloud on their phone, which essentially destroys half of the xCloud's potential, which really harms Microsoft. They invested a lot of time and effort into creating this application and creating these softwares, and now it's all kind of going to waste. Now, I want to back up a little bit here and explain why the Xbox doesn't do as well compared to the PS5. That's mainly because if you look at history, the PlayStation has always outperformed the Xbox. The only time that the Xbox was close was the PS3 versus the Xbox 360. The PS3 sold 87.4 million, and the Xbox 360 sold 84 million units. But when you look at the PS2 versus the Xbox, it's 155 versus 24 million. And then when you look at the PS4, it's 108 million versus 46 million. The only generation where it's been close has been the PS3 versus the 360, and that's mainly because of the popularity of Halo, which peaked in 2007. Ever since then, it's really just been the PlayStation taking over. It's unfortunate, but I personally think it's going to be more of a drastic difference than what the analysts at Forbes are saying. I think that the PlayStation 5 is going to sell more than twice as many units as the Xbox, and I just think that it's mainly because the Xbox team decided to invest so much into the xCloud, and now it's just falling apart. Now, to be fair though, Microsoft did fire back at Apple and criticize them for kind of being a little bit hypocritical. They claim that the reason why they don't want the xCloud on the App Store is because they can't individually review each and every game. So in other words, they wouldn't want a 5-year-old iPhone user to be playing an M-rated game. You know, and that sounds fair, but they also have apps like Netflix on the App Store. And so the same thing could be said. Well, why is it that you're letting Netflix on your store, but not the xCloud? The concept is basically the same. You can't review every show or movie on Netflix. And neither can you do the same with games on the xCloud, yet for one app you have one rule, and then for another app you have another rule. So I definitely think that it's a very interesting case to be looking at, but the point is, I mean, Microsoft is really losing out on this. I really feel bad because I think that Microsoft is a great company where they have great innovation, and there was just a lack of luck in this case. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Nintendo. Nintendo's profits jumped 428% this quarter. And this is according to CNBC. A lot of why Nintendo became so profitable this quarter is because of quarantine and the pandemic. There were a lot more people staying inside to play popular games like Animal Crossing, as well as, the Mario franchise, to, stay at home with their family instead of risking themselves outside. And so when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. And I think that a big reason for why Nintendo surged specifically compared to sales of the PlayStation, sales of the Xbox, is because I think a lot of gamers who are older already have consoles, whereas younger kids, like 5 or 6 years old, they really want to go outside. They really want to go and play at the park, but they just can't. And so parents are in a situation where they have to keep their kids entertained. So they go with Nintendo because the content is just a lot more appropriate for kids. You don't have to worry about potential violence in the games. I mean, I think that there are probably some light violence, like, Mario jumping on a Goomba or something like that, but you're not dealing with graphic stuff. Like, this isn't stuff that is inappropriate for young kids. And so it's excellent for parents. I think it's excellent for kids and for families. I think the Switch in general sold a lot. So it's kind of self-explanatory. In addition to that, Animal Crossing did very well. Um, Animal Crossing sold about 22 million copies, which is very impressive in a quarter. So honestly, great job to Nintendo. I'm really interested in seeing what's going on there. So I also want to talk a little bit about the US government and the current trade war that's going on between the US and China and tensions rising. But I want to talk about WeChat and TikTok. So, as we've talked about last week on the show, TikTok is potentially going to be banned on September 15th if a US corporation isn't able to buy it from ByteDance, which is its parent company. Now, this is quite an interesting case because I'm not a lawyer personally, but there might be some legal issues with this. In fact, TikTok is actually planning legal action against the US government because they claim that the government is going against free expression as well as open markets. And I find that this is very interesting because do the concepts of open markets like can a non-US company claim that the Constitution is being used against them? I think that that's a very interesting concept, to be honest with you, because TikTok is a social media company where Americans are able to express their speech. They're able to express themselves, whether that be comedically, whether that be through other forms of entertainment. It is a right for Americans. And so I guess the question is this an attack on freedom of expression? Furthermore, is it an attack on open markets? Because obviously the US wants their economy to be competitive. And now the question becomes, does that also relate to non-US companies? Because I think that that's something that there's a lot of legal gray area there. And if it does go to the courts, I am really interested to see if it does go to the courts, I am really interested to see what's going to happen. But if you want my honest opinion, I don't even think it's going to go there. I think that ByteDance is going to reach a deal with Microsoft eventually. So it's really not a big deal. Like, I don't really see TikTok suing the US government. And even if they did, I really don't think that much would come about from it. My opinion is just the government's able to ban whichever company they want so long as they're not US companies. I mean, that's my understanding, but I think that there's also a case to be made against that. But while we're on this topic, Trump is also planning on banning WeChat. And WeChat is a very big messaging app that a lot of people from China tend to use. And the reason why is because WeChat isn't banned in China. So if you're of Chinese descent and you have family members who live in China and you live in the US or you live in Canada or wherever it is you live, you're able to communicate with them through WeChat. And it's very specific because you can't use Facebook in China, right? There are a lot of there are a lot of security concerns that the Chinese government has with Facebook, and so you can't use Facebook there. So a lot of people resort to WeChat, but Trump is planning on banning WeChat. So this makes it very difficult for people who are of Chinese descent to communicate with their family who may or may not live in China. Now, there is a bit of a replacement though for WeChat. There's this new app. Well, I don't know if it's new specific per se. I don't know if it's new, but it's definitely new to our ears. It's this app called Signal, and it's kind of similar to WeChat in the sense that people in China can communicate with people in Canada, people in the US, wherever in the world, because it's actually Signal actually isn't banned in China, which actually surprised the company themselves. They were kind of almost floored, well, not floored, but they were kind of surprised themselves at this fact. So I definitely think that if it is possible to invest in Signal, I think now would be a great time. But nonetheless, that's definitely something to look at. Last but not least, I want to talk about some replacements for TikTok. Um, I kind of saved this for the end because I don't really know if there's that much to say. But you look at platforms like Instagram Reels, which is quite similar to TikTok, except I personally have my own criticisms of it. I don't think that it's as advanced as TikTok, and therefore I don't think it's going to have as much of an impact, to be honest with you. There's not a search engine. There aren't categories you can sort by. You know, you're kind of just going in one direction. You're just kind of swiping down. You can't go to the left. You can't go to the right. There just isn't much you can do with it. But with that being said, there's another app called Byte, which was actually created by one of the co-founders of Vine, which was a very popular app, I believe about 5 years ago. Um, so that's definitely an application to keep your eye on, because in general, I look at that app and I realize that it's very similar to TikTok, but it doesn't have the same security concerns. I think it has about 500,000 downloads from Google Play, so definitely something to keep your eye on. But with that being said, we've just passed 15 minutes. Thank you for listening to the news. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you'd like to listen to more of my content, make sure to search me up on Spotify, the weekly business news in 15 minutes. You can also search me up on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.